3, 2, 1.
Da, 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 da.
Hi, I'm Euclidean Vision. Welcome to something again a little different. I'm here today to discuss something quite a bit more important than what I'd usually be discussing. I'd like to look at an upcoming piece of potential EU law that could have drastic ramifications for content creators in all sorts of demographics, but particularly focusing on how it could affect Overwatch content creators like myself, if you can call me a viable content creator. So, Article 13 of the European Copyright Directive is one section of an upcoming EU directive regarding copyright law, funnily enough, and it's this one particularly. There's several articles to this directive, but Article 13 in particular could impact sites such as YouTube and other sort of media sharing platforms. Disclaimer, not against the application of copyright law where it's applicable, like if you're just stealing someone's content. No, don't do that. But it seems this particular piece of legislation could be maybe just a little bit misguided in its inception and what it aims to do. For a more full explanation of how it could work and what it could do and what we could maybe have to do in response to it, there's a video from YouTube themselves saying how it would affect them, and you can also go read the actual wording of the article as part of the directive. I'll put links to both of those below. I'd say go and look at a few people's input on how this could work and what it could do, because it doesn't seem to be set in stone as to whether it's good or bad. But in basic terms, it aims to make host sites such as YouTube responsible for applying copyright protection to the media that is hosted there, rather than the present case where the creator of the content is the one responsible and liable. This obviously applies to content creators whose content is centered around an existing property and that use certain media in their own discussion, analysis, parody, memes, etc. So this theoretically will ultimately lead to YouTube having to remove any video that has the slightest chance to infringe on copyright law. There's so many videos to go through, they have to apply their sort of detection of that wholesale, so as not to become liable themselves for tons of potential infringements of copyright. Defense through the concept of fair use would be far too complex a process for YouTube to protect each and every single one of these videos in order to keep them online, so YouTube's response would actually make sense here, that we're just going to get rid of everything that could harm us because we haven't got time to go through it all. Some videos, therefore, that don't technically infringe on copyright could also be at risk. It places the content of many creators at risk, to be honest. But that is at risk. We're not entirely sure how bad that would be at present. And so, a little further than that, it only affects EU states. Like this law, or this application of law, only really affects EU states, which still includes the UK for the present, for those of us in the middle of all that, whatever that is. But it can still affect creators and viewers regardless of that. So EU creators that will have their videos immediately subject to YouTube's need to comply with copyright law enacted through their automated process, which we know already has some kind of problems with it, near removing the application of fair use, and which means that near all EU creators that make content regarding existing media are at risk of having their videos just flat out removed, ones that exist, ones that they upload now. Then as a viewer within the EU, any piece of content that could infringe on those laws that is made outside the EU that you attempt to view could be blocked. At least that's my understanding of it. Check that one out properly, make sure that that's how that actually works. Don't take my word for it solely. These two impacts on the community of sites such as YouTube could severely impact the site as a whole, and even more particularly deny multitudes of creators the opportunity for income they currently rely on, as well as just sort of damaging the culture of the internet. Which has some problematic elements of culture, but now I don't have a huge following myself. I'm not monetized or anything, but the things I do discuss feature use of the other media that I'm discussing in order to frame my discussion, or sometimes to just make my points clearer. My content should fall under the concept of fair use, as I'm attempting to add a new facet to the media shown. But if Article 13 is passed, my content has at least the potential to be instantly removed, my future videos blocked as well, both for people trying to watch them outside and for me directly. For me, it just sort of removes a bit of a feeling of purpose in my life. Like, it's not that I depend on this as a financial institution of my existence, but there are some much larger Overwatch channels than myself, a bunch of streamers, that this could affect up to the extent of destroying their livelihoods. You know, it's worst case scenario, but that means this is at least something to be cautious about, or to make sure that is understood fully for it to be implemented properly. And for instance, I would like to speak about some other games at some point. Ones with better stories than Overwatch, sorry. I'm also a massive weeb, like, if you haven't noticed that by now, and I'd like to discuss some of my favourite manga down the line, but all of these niches are possibly at threat of losing a huge chunk of their communities. It's not just Overwatch, but that's where I've focused my attention primarily. I thought I'd focus from there. And this can have negative impacts, not just on the creators, but then that leads to a negative impact on the franchise itself, their subsequent companies, that it in turn sort of fulfills the cycle back to the beginning that further detriments YouTube and the creators again. Just to point out how far-reaching these effects could be. So all I want to do on behalf of the Overwatch community is spread some awareness of the relevant possibilities here, try to give some informed commentary to the people at hand of how this could affect us all, financially and culturally. Creators themselves especially are going to be the ones to suffer if this is made into full law, and sort of, again, the culture of the internet at large. If Blizzard have any comment on this, that'd be amazing to know, if their copyright applies to game footage in such a way that, as it's sort of non-reproducible to an extent, YouTube isn't at risk for hosting such, it's not subject to the same sort of copyright law, so that you can theoretically get around some of the limitations that Article 13 would impose if it were passed, or if Blizzard themselves are able to make a statement towards the European Parliament as part of the gaming industry, or in cooperation with some other body like the Internet Society, who've already spoken to the European Parliament, as far as I've read, that can address the concerns of the franchise, the community, and sort of the gaming landscape as a whole, if you will. Overwatch itself could use all the community help it could get at the moment, it seems, and in turn it might have to help its community to get themselves there. So, and that's something I'd like to see. I like this game. I think your story has potential, and you could use doing a bit more work on it, but I'd like to see Overwatch persist, and I don't want to see just the removal of content creators damage it to the extent where things that we don't want to really see happen. So, if there are any bigger channels out there than me that see this and feel this actually could affect you, and it's probably more likely to affect you guys than it is to affect me, check with YouTube the best way to proceed. Go read up on the actual law itself and what it could do, and then maybe even make your own video on this. I think it's important at least to get the discussion out there, and some with a bit more clout than me could be useful for those with the real clout and the know-how how to really do such a thing. Get in touch with the relevant MEP and members of European Parliament in order to let them know why their vote to enact Article 13 could be hugely detrimental for the internet as a whole, and how it could personally affect you. Also make sure to be respectful, rational, and diplomatic when you speak to an MEP, just to sort of point that out to you guys. I know that some of you don't need reminding, some of you evidently do. So, if you want to make an actual proper statement about this, please be respectful in how you do it. We're not sure, obviously, how far-reaching this impact could be, or whether it'll actually have any negative impact. Really, this could all just be everyone being overcautious, and which is fine. It's a good idea to ensure that a law that could affect tons of people is actually implemented properly and discussed fully, and the actual ramifications realised before it's enacted. That's a good idea. That's how you should make laws, probably. So, there is still time for a change to be made. If the change is needed, so do your research to figure out if it's really needed. But we as a community might have to help make that change. We can all be heroes for each other, and I'm sure I've heard somewhere that the world could always use more heroes. So, I hope this has been informative for everyone. Go ask someone who knows what they're on about better than I do if you really, really want to know what you're on about. Thank you to everyone for watching. Hopefully this doesn't cause any of us any severe ramifications. I've been Euclidean Vision, you've been in the embrace of the iris, and hopefully not subject to the EU Copyright Directive. Always remember to appreciate your best girl while memes still allow it. Bye.